He was strong and tall. He was a policeman. He wouldn't let bad people ever would hurt anyone. He was my Baba June. When I was young, I was an amazing kid. I was so special. I was noisy and talkative kid with lots of talents. Even though I made a mess whenever I was painting, he would just laugh. He loved me. He would never, ever hurt me, not even a million years. When he was with me, everything was safe, beautiful. It was nothing to be afraid of, but just one thing. When I was young, I had a disease. I had dark illusions. In that illusion, I had another father. He was a scary man with a big, heavy hands. I also wasn't that special in that nightmare, not that much talented. I was a worthless animal, a monster. I never would know that when he might get angry with my bad behavior. I was a noisy, worthless animal that wouldn't brush her teeth on time, crying hard before going to kindergarten, scared of darkness. So he would beat me with those heavy hands to teach me how to behave. He taught me one task, my Baba June, that I needed to do every day in order to not get lost into that nightmares. I just needed to remember he is my real father and remembering that I'm his talented girl. And all this nightmare will pass. I just need to hold on to Baba June, to the reality. When I was young, I had nightmare full of constant fear. But just right the moment that I was drowning in pain, my real father would come to hold me. I would stop feeling the illusion of blood and pain, even though I still was hearing the nightmare background noises of yelling and beating. But one time my nightmare becomes so real. The nightmare father pulled out part of my hair and his hand and pushed me to the bed. He grabbed my neck that I could see his red face that was filled with anger. He didn't kill me, of course, he couldn't. Nobody dies in illusion, and he wasn't real, after all. The nightmare left me broken. Part of my head bald and eyes full of tears. I was stuck in a constant fear. I couldn't tolerate that illusion anymore. Something in me didn't let me to feel my real Baba. I felt that kind, talented girl in my heart turned to an angry monster. I felt I had no kindness left in my inner being. I was angry with myself, my nightmares, and the whole world. It must be a reason that I have all this pain in my life. I must have been a beast. That's why I don't deserve to have a good life. Maybe the nightmare was right. Maybe I'm a monster. I took a knife and I started to cut my hands. I had that much pain in my heart that I couldn't feel knife and blood. Baba June ran to room. He took my hands. What are you doing? It's just a nightmare. Look at me. You are my daughter. Whatever you do, you are still my precious daughter. Think of all beautiful things that you got in your heart. All that stories, all that kindness, all that beautiful emotions. Don't let them go. They are still here, inside you. Then he hugged me very tight. I dropped the knife and I cried in his arms. He was warm, tall, and powerful. He would take away all the bad people. I grew up with my tall, powerful, nice dad. He helped me forget about my sickness most of the day. He helped me win many medals for running. He gave me confidence to go after my dreams. I got my job at the age of 15 and I became an illustrator. 3 years later, I was designer and director in a known animation company. He was so proud of me. And also, I was a monster, a worthless creep, whenever my nightmare came to my reality. A nightmare and illusion, filled with constant fear and pain. He helped me to pass through all that nightmares. He would hold me tight every day, every night to bring me to the reality. Years passed, living in two worlds, one a nightmare and one a dream. One day, the nightmare stopped. I was cured. In that afternoon, I packed up everything I owned and I headed to the airport. Baba June came with me. We walked side by side. Nobody could see him but me, and life was beautiful. Most of my childhood, I had an imaginary father, and the real father was the imaginary one. The reason that I think I started to act differently in my life, because of my imagination. I started to see myself in a new way, even imagination. And I believe it doesn't matter if in fact in physical world does it exist or not. We just need to help the child to believe no matter what happened to her and no matter what they tell her, she's not what they're telling to her that she is. My way to make that change in my life was having an imaginary dad. Does it mean that everybody can be helped with having imaginary dad? No. All of us, we are unique. We all have our own way to feel better, to find a way. And here, we want to go after that. What are these ways? And what's the root of the problem? That someone can change her world or his world after trauma, and the other one will be drowned by it.
Oh crap, I knew that was going to be a really hard transition. So the reason we wanted to open with that story is because when we talk about statistics and we're going to talk about definitions and it's going to get very textbook, it's hard to kind of personalize the experiences. So we thought that would be important to share. So Sarah is obviously not alone in experiencing this across the world, but in the US alone, adverse child experiences cover almost half the population. So basically, half the people in this room are more than likely statistically experience some kind of trauma in their life. And we're obviously talking about extreme trauma, not, you know, you fell off your bike and got a boo-boo kind of thing, but serious trauma, which we'll give more examples of. And it's really not being addressed. And so even half of that half has had more than one kind of trauma or experience in their life. So what is ACE? So the Center for Disease Control and Prevention defines it as such. So it can be childhood experiences, both positive and negative, that have tremendous impact on the future in terms of violence, victimization, perpetration, that word, and lifelong health opportunities. As such, early experiences are important as a public health issue. And this is what a lot of people don't actually highlight. And we'll actually talk about not just the social impact, but the fiscal impact this also has just here in America. And I will go into a study that the CDC actually did in terms of deep dive into this stats of this. And obviously the good news is ACE can be preventable, but and that's one of our missions and our goals, but preventing trauma is obviously a dream many people have, but you know, how do you prevent child abuse? How do you prevent divorces and separations and things like that? It's hard, but you know, our mission is that we want to try. If not prevent, be able to provide tools to children who may not have been able to come to certain realizations that Sahar did. Sahar could have gone two ways. Right now she stands here in front of you guys as a beautiful, strong, very passionate, very determined entrepreneur, right? Not everybody ends up this way. So when we're talking about ACE, we're talking about more these kind of specific topics, so abuse, whether it's emotional, physical, sexual, Also, under that category comes household challenges. This is when even a child witnesses some kind of abuse. So if they see their mother being beaten by their father, or their father does some kind of substance or drugs, there's a divorce or separation in family, even a family member being incarcerated and they have to get taken to visit them in jail and things like that, that can have traumatic impact on a child. And obviously there's also neglect, that can be emotional or physical as well. And then the study itself broke it down into this, so they did over 18,000 people. It tends to skew towards obviously women having more of the experiences, and then that skews even further when you talk about people that tend to fall in the minorities, or in terms of being poverty or minority ethnically, they tend to get it worse. And again, this is stats showing that it's not just one, but there is an alarming percentage that actually have 4 or more of these types of experiences throughout their life. And so why does that matter, and how does it affect a child? So you went through something, and so what happens? So the study has shown the long-term effects of these kind of experiences impact you into adulthood. This means you'll take more riskier health behaviors, you'll have more chronic health conditions, early death, and you're more likely to obviously be incarcerated or go into drugs and just live much unhealthier lifestyles. And this is, they actually have an ACE pyramid, obviously starting with the foundation of going through an experience. It can actually have neurological development issues as well in terms of trauma, as well as the ones you would think are more obvious, like social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, which lead to you adopting more risky behaviors that lead to obviously disabilities, diseases, and having other social problems, and early death. It's actually, statistically, you can shave off 20 years of your life if you've had some kind of childhood trauma. And then more of the economic toll, right? And so the study has shown that the cost goes into the billions, and this is in terms of productivity loss, healthcare, need of special education, child welfare, as well as criminal justice. So again, a lot of people don't connect the two to actually an economic impact, which it does have. And again, these are just stats for here in America. This is not even worldwide. And here's some other numbers. So it's estimated that ACE affects about 34 million children, and the direct cost of that is about $33 billion here in the US. So what does that all mean, and why does this keep happening? This is one quote that's a favorite of mine from Lisa Firestone, who's a PhD in clinical psychology, and she believes that we really underestimate our kids. We think they really can't understand emotional complexities. We'd rather avoid having difficult conversations with our children, right, than sitting down and explaining to them, why are you angry, why are you upset, or if you're being bullied, why is that the case? Why are they picking on you? Or why are you bullying other children? These are things most parents and guardians will want to avoid, mostly because we think they'll just grow out of it, or they don't want to deal with the conversation, or they just don't know how to have that conversation, right? That's also a huge problem. And another addition to this problem is that as a society, we really focus on academic abilities and growth, right? So we care about our kids doing well in school. We want you to be the best in math, the best in reading, the best in science. And there are plethora of apps in the App Store all focused on these topics. But what we found was missing was really this focus on what we say is emotional intelligence. So EQ, so what are those things like resilience, optimism, trust, mindfulness, empathy, all these kind of things that if you teach children at a young age, the statistics have shown that will actually impact your adult life and lead you to be a happier adult. So this all sounds awful. What can be done? There is solutions to the problem. So there was a recent study in the UK at Durham University that actually implemented teaching philosophy to children. So something you wouldn't really learn until you hit college, they're actually taking those concepts and teaching it at a much, much younger age. And what the study found is in teaching these kind of things of resilience and empathizing with others, not only improved their communication and cognitive skills, but it just kind of had a profound effect on as they grew up throughout the study, and it really impacted those children who are considered disadvantaged groups. Another thing that studies have shown is meditation and mindfulness. So you guys have probably heard this buzzword a lot here, especially in the Bay Area. A lot of schools in Atherton and Menlo implement this kind of mindfulness teaching now in the schools. And it's actually been a study at Stanford actually shown that it did help actually decrease anxiety, helped improve attention. It helped to kind of help children who are on the spectrum of certain disorders, depression, and their stress. Which seems obvious, but again, not a lot of parents think to implement these kind of tools. And then it's nice that there are these general things, but ultimately each child is unique. So, you know, we all have different cultures, we all have different norms, we all have different experiences, and so there's really